Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from Beyond. I'm Zeckthar.
And I'm Yuksen.
And we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires, and this month, we will be discussing the mysterious and sinister Inquisition of the Empire of Man.
Indeed, this month we will chronicle how they came to be, what role they played in the Imperium of Man, with some notable characters along the way. And as usual, we will be ending this month with our Q&A, where we answer your question you send us in the comments.
Well, that's right. But before we start, if you like our stuff, feel free to follow, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really like our voxes, feel free to join our membership program, like Sir Bender Byton, our very first member.
Quite right, brother. And thank you to our other two members, Hermes Skirty and Andarchy138. Well, Zeckthar, what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, this week, Yuksen, we will be discussing the origins of the Inquisition. And the beginning starts with the man by the name of
Malcador the Sigillite.
Now, before we get into Malcador, a few things. One, if you want to know more about the Sigillite, feel free to check out my short box,
Malcador the Sigillite.
In that box, I go into quite a bit of detail about 40k's Merlin. The other thing I wish to stress is the origins of the Inquisition are shrouded in mystery. In fact, there is a branch of the Inquisition itself, the Ordo Originatus, dedicated to unraveling 10 millennia of myths, exaggerations, and lies. This is a difficult task, raised to impossibility due to the opposing work of the Ordo Redactus, who focus their own efforts into deliberately obscuring the past, lest the enemies of mankind discover some advantage through knowledge of the Inquisition's beginnings. What is known, though, is the Inquisition was formed by Malcador the Sigillite by the order of the Emperor of Mankind during the final days of the Horus Heresy. As the story goes, Malcador, the regent of Terra at the time, was charged by the Emperor immediately after news had reached Terra of the War Master Horus's betrayal during the massacre of the Loyalist Astartes on Esfand III, to gather a group of dedicated imperial servants whose loyalty, courage, and strength of mind was unquestioned. Malcador initially chose 12 people of an inquisitive nature, 8 loyal space marines taken from all the space marine legions, and 4 mortal imperial lords and administrators, who would respectively become the initial core of the Grey Knights and the conclaves of the Inquisition. They were presented by Malcador to the Emperor at the Imperial Palace after being brought secretly through enemy lines during the Siege of Terra, the final campaign of the heresy. These were individuals of unblemished loyalty, determination, and strength of mind, who would serve the Emperor well in the years to come. Beyond that one story, the legends diverge, ascribing numerous identities to each of the 12, some ludicrous, many credible, and all utterly unprovable. Yet, we do know the names for certain of a few of these men, such as the names of the 8 Astartes, who are not part of the origins of the Inquisition, but the original Grand Masters of the Grey Knights. The frustrating part about this is that they changed their names when they became Grey Knights, just to confuse us. Yet the foundations of the Inquisition were created from 4 mortal lords and administrators of the Imperium chosen by Malcador. The foundation of the Inquisition remains shrouded in mystery and still a much debated subject amongst imperial scholars. Yet we do know one of the original founders was a man by the name of Kyril Sinderman. Now, Kyril Sinderman was the most famous and perhaps skilled of the Imperium of Man's itinerators during the Great Crusade, who served as a chief itinerator for the War Master Horus's 63rd Expeditionary Fleet and dwelled aboard his great flagship,
The Vengeful Spirit.
Sinderman was a particular favorite of Captain Garviel Loken of the Luna Wolves Legion, with whom he often discussed the weightier matters of philosophy and the reasons why the Emperor of Mankind had undertaken the Great Crusade to force other human cultures into his imperium, by diplomacy if possible, but by force if necessary. Sinderman was a dedicated atheist and powerful proponent of the imperial truth until the day during the Luna Wolves' conquest of the world designated 6319, when he and several remembrancers from the 63rd expedition witnessed the demonic possession of Luna Wolf's battle brother, Xavier Jubal, to see what could only be described as a demon, called every one of Sinnerman's most cherished beliefs into question. He spent solar months after the incident cooped up in the vengeful spirit's archive chambers, hunting for answers in the knowledge of the human past. He was particularly concerned by one burning question. Why would the Emperor have promulgated the atheistic doctrine of the imperial truth if he, as humanity's greatest psyker, was keenly aware that such entities existed within the Immaterium? Sinnerman eventually spoke with Euphrates Keeler, the remembrancer who had taken hololiths and images of Jubal's hideous transformation, but had come to grips with her own confrontation with the demonic by becoming a devoted follower of the Lectitio Divinatus, the growing imperial religious cult that believed in the divinity of the emperor and ultimately laid the foundation for the imperial cult and the ecclesiarchy. Sinnerman attempted to use fragments of texts and images taken by Keeler and other remembrancers to decipher the religious texts sacred to the word-bearer's legion known as the Book of Lorgar, which supposedly held the collected wisdom of many dark priesthoods and superstitious faiths across the galaxy. It had been created after Primarch Lorgar had completed his infamous pilgrimage 4 solar decades before. While reading a portion of the text aloud from the heretical tome, Sinnerman inadvertently summoned a lesser demon from the warp that began to damage the library stacks of the archives aboard the vengeful spirit. Euphrates Keeler banished the creature back to the Immaterium through the exercise of her extraordinary faith in the Emperor, after which she fell into a coma-like state. This latest encounter with the demonic broke Sinnerman's remaining tenuous belief in the atheism and materialism of the imperial truth, and forced him to confront the reality that he lived in a universe where spiritual beings did exist and could hunger for the lives and souls of human beings. In such a universe, the only thing that could protect men was the power of other supernatural beings. Thus, Sinnerman came to exchange the imperial truth for the new faith in the divine god emperor, as embodied in the teachings of Lectitio Divinatus. By this time, the corruption of chaos had wormed its way deep into War Master Horus and most of his renamed Sons of Horus Legion. And so, with the aid of Captain Aecton Cruz of the Legion, Sinnerman, the Remembrancer Mercedes Olaton, and Euphrates Keeler managed to escape the vengeful spirit during the start of the Echelon 3 atrocity. They made their way to the Imperial frigate Eisenstein, and from there they were taken in by the Death Guard loyalists under the command of Captain Nathaniel Garrow, and escaped from the Esfon system to Terra after many trials and tribulations to warn the Emperor of his son's great betrayal. Now, skipping ahead a bit.
Oh, thank goodness.
Surviving the tragic events of the Horus Heresy, Kyril Sinnerman eventually went on to become one of Malkador the Sigillite's 4 original founding members of the newly created Inquisition. He assumed a new identity, Lestan Veritas, and he would faithfully go on to continue to serve the Imperium of Man. He was kept alive for the next 1,500 Terran years through the use of an ornate suit of power armor to conjecture with arcane technologies. During this time, he also somehow developed the formidable abilities of a psyker. Veritas survived well into the middle centuries of the 32nd millennium, and during the War of the Beast, Inquisitor Veritas had garnered a reputation as a senior member of the Inquisition's Puritan faction, who was well known for his fanatical loyalty to the God Emperor and the Imperial cult. A cold and calculated individual, the man who had once been known for being such an open-minded and philosophical thinker, was now a cold-hearted authoritarian who viewed the Inquisition as the ultimate tool of control. It was to be used to rein in the Senatorium Imperialis and eventually directly rule over humanity for mankind's own benefit. In fact, I believe this is where he, with the help of Inquisitor Margaret Wynand, changed the Inquisition forever. Right, brother?
Well, excellently told, dear brother. And yes, well, as you mentioned prior, it wasn't until the 32nd millennium that drastic change occurred. You may ask what the catalyst was for this drastic change. Orcs. more specifically, the disaster known as the War of the Beast. To put it in perspective, the orcs almost took over the Sol system and Terra itself. That's how much of a problem it was. For those who want to know more about the war, you can check out our 2 boxes on the subject titled The War of the Beast, Part 1 and Part 2.
Pardon me, brother. You mind if I, for just half a second, say something?
Sure.
War! Sorry, go ahead.
No. Has to be deeper.
War! You better
Uh,
carry on before the 2 orc boys come back and find us. Speaking of which, do you know what has happened to him? I haven't seen him in a while. They got to be up to something.
I don't want to know.
Hey, last time they showed up anyways, they gave us that horrible food concoction that they made. I didn't think that grot burgers could actually be unedible. You see, when you use motor oil as a condiment, it kind of loses all the rest of its flavor. But anyway, sorry.
Amongst other things.
Yes, amongst other things. I swear my sandwich moved by itself. But anyways, Yuksen, carry on.
Now, there were 2 characters in our boxes that we briefly talked about that were key components in the change. The inquisitorial representative to the High Lords of Terra, known as Margareth Wynand, and Inquisitor Laston Veritas. Now let's take a look at what's happening behind the scenes between these 2 individuals. Now, as you mentioned before, Inquisitor Veritas viewed the Inquisition as the ultimate tool of control, and he finally saw his opportunity to take control during the events of the War of the Beast. Veritas called for an inquisitorial conclave against the inquisitorial representative to the High Lords of Terra, an inquisitor named Wynand, who he had viewed as grossly negligent in her duties as the senior representative of the Inquisition and her mishandling against the orc warlord known as the Beast. He also accused her of becoming corrupted by political intrigue and infighting that plagued the Senatorum Imperialis. It must be noted that Wynand became aware of the threat posed by the Beast before any of the other High Lords, and after allying with Vangric and managed to organize the first response to the Greenskins on Ardamantua. The conclave inevitably failed, which forced Veritas to take a more direct approach in removing the upstart Inquisitor. He did so by deploying his own inquisitorial agents in an assassination attempt upon Wynand, who was only saved thanks to the efforts of the Venom assassin Isad Wire. Following this unsuccessful attempt on her life, Wynand was forced to fake her death and go into hiding. Veritas was then appointed as the new inquisitorial representative and assumed a seat on the Senatorum Imperialis. Following the appearance of an orc attack moon over Terra, Veritas abandoned the High Lords of Terra in order to pursue his vendetta against Wynand after discovering her deception. Wynand's deception, having been discovered by Veritas, had to fight through several attempts on her life on her way to the inquisitorial fortress on Terra. When she finally arrived at the underground complex, she was berated by her colleagues for putting the threat of Xenos before chaos, but nonetheless was adamant that humanity confronts the orcs before anything else. Having failed in the demise of Wynand, Veritas moved against Draken Vangric, the Grand Master of Assassins, who thwarted Veritas' assassination attempt on his life by deploying his own Ephecio Assassinorum operatives, who successfully took out the sniper sent to dispatch him. When Jaskina Tull, the speaker of the Chartist captains, attempted to organize a massive offensive against the Orc attack moon, which threatened Terra, by utilizing volunteers and merchant fleet vessels known as the Proletarian Crusade, Veritas refused to support her. Due to their lack of military resources and poor strategy and a complete lack of military knowledge or experience, the crusade proved a complete disaster. Instead, Veritas focused his efforts on gaining complete control of both the Senatorum Imperialis and the Inquisition. With the Crusade's failure and appearance of a mysterious orc ambassador before the High Lords themselves, Veritas condemned the members of the Senatorum Imperialis for their incompetence and took his leave. Not long after this event, a small force of Eldari Harlequins attempted to infiltrate the Imperial Palace in a failed attempt to deliver a message to the Emperor of Mankind. In the aftermath of this lamentable event, Veritas found himself aligned with Vangeric. After interrogating the Harlequin Shadowseer Lariel Ray, Vangeric was able to successfully mediate an uneasy truce between Veritas and Wynand. The duo declared themselves the co-inquisitorial representatives and cooperated with Corland in overthrowing Lord Commander Udin Mak Udo. After the coup, Veritas gave Corland potentially war-changing information that the lost Primarch Vulcan had been rediscovered on the world of Caldera. When Vulcan was found by the Imperials, he seemed to know who Veritas was. His relation to the Primarch remains unknown. He again displayed significant knowledge of the past when he alerted Corland to the existence of the last bastion of the Sisters of Silence on Nadiris, stating that he had been seeking them out for quite some time, even before the war. After the Beast was successfully defeated upon the world of Ulanor, both Veritas and Wynand laid out their future visions for the Inquisition. Both agreed to the foundation of two new Ordos, the Ordo Xenos and the Ordo Malleus, with Wynand serving as the leader of the former and Veritas as the leader of the latter. The Ordo Malleus, which in Low Gothic literally means Order of the Hammer, would be tasked with the responsibility of investigating and destroying the physical manifestations of chaos throughout the Imperium.
No doubt this jurisdiction also extended to those attempting to or have already caused such manifestations. Yes.
But of course.
Yes.
On the other hand, the Ordo Xenos was tasked with the duty to investigate and catalog Xenos species and destroy any classified as a threat to the Imperium. This jurisdiction has been expanded to any members of the Imperium that deal with Xenos, trade or deal in their technology, or seek to hide or protect hostile alien species from Imperial forces. At the same time, it was decided that each division should have a chamber militant. For the Malleus, it was to be the elite Psychic Grey Knights, the chapter of Space Marines, whose creation was based around destroying chaos. The Ordo Xenos was to have a brand new militant known as the Death Watch. This militant's forces were made from the survivors of the various chapters who took part in the initial invasion of the Beast's capital world of Ulanor Prime. Now, during this meeting, Veritas collapsed from poison administered by Draken Vangeric, and Wynand rushed him to the inquisitorial fortress of Terra for treatment. Vangeric had administered the poison days before by mixing in an unseen but otherwise harmless gas that only became lethal when it mixed with the life support chemicals of Veritas's own power armor. The dying Veritas was eventually able to awake and divulge his greatest secrets to Wynand. He revealed he was the ancient Iterator, Kyril Cinderman, one of the 4 original founders of the Inquisition, and had seen Horus himself fall to chaos. He gave Wynand the key to the Citadel of Titan and named her his successor as the link between the Inquisition and the secret chapter of Space Marines on Titan. He also revealed that Vangeric had likely secretly given Wynand an antidote to save her from the same poison that killed him, and that the mad Grand Master of Assassins harbored romantic feelings for her. Before dying, he urged Wynan to work with Vangerick for a time to prevent the Imperium from devolving into civil war. Wynan mourns the passing of her rival, and likely the oldest man in the Imperium. What do you think about this whole escapade, brother?
Well, first off, for those who didn't listen to our Vox on the War of the Beast Part 1 or Part 2, could you explain to the people what happened to Vangerick?
Well, to be brief, Vangerick ended up going completely insane from being drunk on power.
Yeah, but if I recall right, that was like several hundred years later, right?
I want to say yes.
Originally, he became kind of a tyrant for the Imperium, and everybody was kind of okay with it because he seemed like he was doing a good job. And then
he was doing a better job than
the Senatorium was. Yeah. So everybody was kind of cool with it, and then kind of went off the deep end after a few hundred years.
And then finally, Maximus Thane, who was, I believe, then actually the Lord Commander, ended up going after him to remove him, and he ended up stashing himself away at an Evisur temple. The Evisur temple.
Yeah, Vangerick. Yeah.
And pretty much all of the forces that Thane, actually, not pretty much, all of Thane's forces did get annihilated. And it came down to, in the end, 3 people in a showdown. It was Vangerick, Thane, and I believe, actually, Isadwire, who Vangerick had turned into a Evisur assassin, but somehow he was able to override himself enough that he basically
he killed Vangerick, right?
Peace, and he left, allowing Thane to blow Vangerick away.
Ah, yes.
Which infuriates most readers of these chronicling, because before he died, he said, "Don't you want to hear what happened to Kurz?" Or something along those lines.
Yeah, I do remember that. Everybody's like, "What?" He didn't care. Just boom. Yeah. I do vaguely remember that. But it was, by the way, just for anybody who wants to know, anybody who lasts in the Imperium with power, when they get true power for some weird reason after a short period of time or a long period of time, they eventually just kind of go nuts, which to me anyways causes a little concern, because there's one guy that's running the whole thing right now in the 42nd millennium, isn't there?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Anyways, apart from that, you asked anyways what about this whole escapade. Well, first off, believe it or not, I've actually, since we'd written the script, I had done some digging, and we actually know who a couple of the other original people were of the Inquisition. Would you like to know who they are, Yuksen?
Sure.
Okay. Well, as we know anyways, Kyrell Cinderman was one of them. The second one was Amandera Kendall, who was a former Sister of Silence who became Malcador's Agenta Tartarus during the Heresy, who more or less commands the first inquisitorial retinue and is the first person to declare exterminatus on the world. Wow. Okay.
Huh.
When before only the Emperor and the Primarchs had that authority. It also should be noted she wasn't granted the authority at the time either, but took it upon herself to commit the act. Very, very inquisitorial, by the way. That whole aspect.
But in comparison to a lot of Inquisitors nowadays, I assume that she had better judgment.
Well, let's hope. And then the other guy that we know of anyways is Lamel Gamon, who is a remembrancer with a psychic potential who gets tutored by Aramon, of all people. You remember who Aramon is?
He's a chaos.
Thousand Sons.
Yeah.
He was
basically the right-hand man to Magnus.
Yeah. And becoming a good friend of his. The visions of one of his friends convinced him to leave Prospero just before the wolves showed up. But they end up...
Another person who went, okay, bye.
Yeah. But they end up in prison. But he ends up being in prison and then transferred to the Sisters of Silence, who in turn lose him to the Thousand Sons once they start Magnus shard hunting. After that, he gets forcibly turned into a demon host by the Thousand Sons, fusing him with one of the Magnus shards. Ahriman removes the shard later, and in the process of freeing him, Gamon becomes immune to possession and gains a portion of knowledge from Magnus. He becomes the Inquisitor Probius, whose main goal was trying to revive the Emperor.
Sorry, but my head is because people kept probing him.
Yeah, well, that's normally what the Xenos do, and it's up the bum. But not with this case. So if you were wondering anyways, yes, we do know who a few others are, but the fourth guy, that's kind of up for debate. One of the hypotheses of it was Moriana, who shows up. That's the if you've been listening to my voxes and Yuksen, I don't know if you remember this one, but it was Abaddon ended up talking to this like dark seer in the Immaterium before he really got rolling. That was Moriana.
Okay.
So it's the concept that she fell to chaos, but this is highly debatable that she was one of the first of the Inquisition. But that's one of the people, anyways, that they're just like, well, it might be, and her past is so shadowed in mystery, nobody really knows.
What's interesting is how none of these were perpetuals.
Right. Well, okay, Kyrell Cinderman, anyways, came pretty close. Just simply, anyways, is that power suit that he had.
Yeah.
Lasting 1,500 years, that's pretty good for a human. But getting back to this whole escapade and the secrecy and all that stuff behind it, there's two things that really kind of pull out in my mind. First off, anyways, Kyrell Cinderman. Now, all the stuff that I've read about him is before he became an Inquisitor.
Right.
Back when he was on the Vengeful Spirit. And he is kind of this old, jolly soul, so to speak.
And he actually questioned things.
Well, yeah. Well, he was inquisitive by nature, which makes him great anyways for the Inquisitors. But the concept anyways of him being this kind of old, jolly soul to this cold-hearted,
extremely narrow tunnel vision,
authoritarian figure. Yes, exactly. Is just... It kind of makes sense when you think about it because he's been around for 1,500 years. And it wasn't the good 1,500 years to be around in either. I mean, right. He lived through the heresy and the Great Scouring. And he watched all the Primarchs disappear. And, I mean, it was literally and watching the decay and the corruption of humanity. He literally watched all of this. And try to do something about it, but it's like, you know, taking a pin hammer to the Great Wall of China. It's just, there's only so much you can do. I can see why his character drastically changed. It's just, to me, it's kind of sad, honestly.
Well, and like I said, he appears to have extreme tunnel vision by this point in time.
By the 32nd millennium, yeah.
Because all these massive things are happening, like, for example, an attack moon, which, by the way, they were known to basically eat other planets.
Right. But you can see why he's so tunnel vision at this point, right?
And instead of going,
no, you
work on this.
You can see why he's so tunnel vision at this point, right?
Because he's trying to take everything into control.
It's the aspect that he's lived for 1,500 years at this point. He's trying exactly what you just said anyways. He's trying to gain control because he's tried so many other options and so many other ways anyways of doing things, and none of them seem to work because humanity keeps seeming to seep down into this horrible aspect of life. So at some point he comes to the conclusion that he's like, well, I have to figure out anyways how to deal with this. I have to do this. And that is a weight that is too large for a single man.
Especially when he decides to focus on, instead of trying to deal with an emergency, go after somebody who was already helping stop that emergency originally.
Right. I mean, well, you know how many orc campaigns he probably lived through at that point? I mean, he was around
but in this case, the thing showed up at the front door.
Well, And I think honestly, that's
I mean,
really. I agree with you, Yuksen, there, but I think that's honestly what really kind of broke him. Is that this ambassador shows up and it speaks to the people there, and instead of having like one resounding voice or anything, anyways, that was considered, ruling wise, they all began to bicker and argue and just stand back in horror. And he's looking at this, and he's like, "These are supposed to be the leaders of mankind, and they did nothing."
No, I'm talking about when it first showed up. That was before the ambassador even did
Okay,
anything.
well, yeah, but no, I'm saying what I think his breaking point is that when he saw that, and he's just like, you know what, I'm done with you people. I am just done.
Though I do find it funny also how he decided to send assassins against, the Grand Master of Assassins, thinking that would work very well.
Well, I think he did that because, for two reasons. One is that the Inquisitors, which, by the way, you bring up a good point anyways. When the Inquisitors or the Assassinorum, when they play for the game of power anyways, they really play for keeps. There isn't like spy networks or anything like that. It's just like murder the other person.
Oh, there's spy networks also, but...
Well, yeah, but it's more along the lines that when they would go to make their move, it's just like, kill them all. There isn't a, let's work through this diplomatically, or...
Well, he did try to do that originally.
It's just
he did try to do that originally with Wynand.
Well, Wynand he did, but he didn't do it with Vangarick. By the time he decided, we're going to get rid of Vangarick, he's just like, we're done. Kill him. And for the second point that you were saying anyways, is like, who better to send to kill an assassin than an assassin? I mean, who else are you going to send?
Well, I was saying that it doesn't, yeah, it's just like, okay, you would think maybe it wouldn't be a brilliant idea since, you got to know if somebody's in charge of assassins, they'd have some sort of counter against assassins. And they're probably going to be better than anything the Inquisition's going to pull out.
Well, like I said, they'd never see it coming. An assassin killing another assassin? Brilliant! Okay, well, real quick anyways, before we move on to people I really don't want to talk about, but what do you think of Kyrell Cinderman and this kind of, and the origins of at least the two Majoris Ordos and the origin of the Inquisition itself?
Okay, so when it comes to Cinderman, like I said, I think, he was this broad-minded person and actually asked questions and stuff originally and earlier on in his life, and then he became this very narrow tunnel vision person, which ended up becoming a problem, major problem.
Right. Well, but you like I said before, you can see why he became so narrow visioned, right?
Yes. But because this narrow vision was also focused solely on, like the majority of the Inquisition, which buried Wynand, was focused on, well, we're supposed to be focused on chaos instead of this thing that's right in front of them. Just saying.
Well, no. So maybe anyways, when he actually came into, a conclusion with Wynand, kind of opened up a little bit more of his background before he became this Inquisitor.
I'm talking about, I haven't gotten to that part yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
So because of that, it's just he wasn't looking at the big picture is the way that I can say it. He wasn't really looking at the big picture of what was happening at the time.
Or he was looking at the big picture.
Or ignoring the parts that he didn't want to focus on.
I would say he was looking at the big picture, but he wasn't seeing what was right in front of him.
Yeah. He was just cutting out the parts that he didn't want to focus on.
Right. Because as we know anyways.
I don't want to know anything about the works. Just chuck it out.
Well, no. Because as we know anyways, the biggest peril to the Imperium of Man is chaos, right?
Well.
It is. It just straight up is. I'm not saying anyways that there aren't other perils in the universe. I'm just saying the biggest one is chaos.
In general, yes.
Oh, come on, Yuksen. I know you're a big fan of the orcs.
Well,
But-
like in this situation at the time, the largest peril for humanity was not something that wasn't there, but something that was there. What was there at the time was orcs, not demons, orcs.
Okay, let me put it this way, anyways. So if the whole War of the Beast is going on, right? And they start, and what they do is they end up focusing on the orcs, right? What
Right.
happens if Abaddon at that point decided to actually launch his crusade? He didn't at the time because he was, still in the Immaterium. But
Well,
let's
they
say
would
he
have still
decided
been
to.
screwed anyways, even if they had been focusing just on chaos.
They just would have been trucked.
Either way, they would
Yeah.
have.
So like I said before, anyways, is that he's looking at the big picture and he's not seeing what's right in front of him. That's the problem. It's like you see all the people is like if you're getting hit with vegetables, people are throwing vegetables at you, and you see all the people sitting back there and they're starting to throw watermelons at you. And you're like, okay, how do we defend against this? And you're looking at that, but you don't see the little kid right in front of you with a giant tomato that's hurling it right at you, right at your face. He's not seeing the imminent danger right in front of him.
He's seeing what future is, not present.
Exactly.
What you're trying to get at.
Yeah.
But one of the things I do find funny is how they set this plan in motion that yes, there's going to be two different Ordos, two different people are going to be in control of them. And what's the first thing he does when he's about to die? I am naming you my successor.
Probably the only person that he trusted at that point.
So these two people are actually one. And I'm giving you the keys to the Grey Knights.
Real quick before we do move on, anyways, what do you think? Just quick synopsis. What do you think of the Ordo, Xenos, and Malleus?
Okay, so both of them have their pluses and minuses when it comes to their individuals. We'll talk about that more after you're done talking about the next person.
Well,
and
not
also
only that, but
when we talk about them individually later
right.
on in the month. But overall, I do think it was a wise choice that they split up into more than one branch so that it'd be less likely to have this sort of thing happen again where they're just like, well, our role is chaos and that's the only thing we're supposed to be focused on is chaos.
Right.
Like, well, there's other threats too.
Right.
So,
well, and that gets back to what I was kind of originally stating a few minutes ago. I think that when Sinnerman and Winan got together and they actually split this up, I think this had a lot more of Sinnerman's old mentality to it than Veritas's mentality, if that makes sense.
yeah. And then also there's the fact that another reason why they probably created the Ordo Xenos is so that, they would actually know more about aliens, since the only other people that actually knew a lot about aliens was the Magos, the Mechanicus.
Yeah.
Which, as we all know, are very open with their information. I mean, really, they talk a lot.
You're right, Yuksen. They just love sharing it with everybody.
Unless it's something that nobody wants to know about. And then they do keep talking on and on and on.
I mean, we talked about it in one of our Voxes when Belisarius Cawl was trying to rise the Primarch from the grave, pretty much. He kept his mouth shut pretty much the entire time.
I'm just doing what I was told. Not you, the other guy.
So, anyways, we do have to move on. And
I know you've been delaying as much as you can, but just rip it off like a Band-Aid. Go.
Now we come to the part of the show I've been dreading. No, I can do this. Now, let's talk about the final Ordo Majoris, the Ordo Hereticus. Yes, those dark inquisitors that are tasked with protecting mankind from itself by combating such internal threats to the Imperium as treason, mutation, heresy, apostate members of the ecclesiarchy, and unsanctioned psychers, commonly known as witches, across much of the Imperium. It is this latter function that has earned the Inquisitors of the Ordo Hereticus the name witch hunters. Mutants, rebels, and heretics are also targeted by the Ordo Hereticus. The Ordo has no qualms at all about acting against threats in the other Imperial Adepta, and many a renegade Adeptus Ministerium cardinal or corrupt tech priest has met their end at the hands of a witch hunter. These Inquisitors are some of the most feared individuals in the entire Imperium, and like all Inquisitors, they have ultimate authority over any other Imperial organizations in the Adeptus Terra and can demand assistance from any other source of authority in the Imperium. Now, the Inquisitors of the Ordo Hereticus are generally considered darker and more sinister than even their Ordo Xenos and Ordo Malleus brethren, because of their focus of eliminating human enemies of the Emperor within the Imperium, which has transformed them into a grim, paranoid, and unforgiving lot. Yet of the three Ordo Majoris, they are the youngest, and didn't show up until the 36th millennium, at the end of the Age of Apostasy. Now, this is actually a very interesting time during the history of the Imperium of Man.
And if you want to know more, check out my brother's Vox, The Age of Apostasy.
Quite right, brother. But for those who didn't listen to my Vox about the Age of Apostasy, let me give you the bullet points. The ecclesiarchy became so powerful that a man by the name of Gauge Van Dier took over the ecclesiarchy and the senatorium. Claiming the power of the emperor in all but name, the man became drunk with power and slowly became insane. He was eventually killed by the brides of the emperor, who eventually became the Sisters of Battle. You know, the nuns with guns. Sebastian Thor became the new ecclesiarchy and set to work balancing the government of the Imperium. No longer would the ecclesiarchy be part of the senatorium, but a separation of church and state went into effect. But Thor was not the only one who sought to restore balance to the Imperium's political structure, to prevent another tyrant like Van Dier from ever again arising from within the Imperium's own internal power structure. Two new divisions of the Inquisition were created. The Ordo Hereticus, tasked with eliminating all threats to the Emperor's will, which came from within the Imperium, no matter how high up they were found, and the Ordo Sicarius, which was tasked with policing the Officio Assassinorum and ensuring that no Imperial assassin would ever again get diverted from their task to serve their own or some other official's ambition. The Sisters of Battle were named the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Hereticus, for while they shared the faith of the Ministerium, their ultimate loyalty was to the God Emperor alone, and the Inquisition always spoke for the Emperor. In a clash between the Ministerium and the needs of the Imperium, as defined by the Ordo Hereticus, the Ordo Militant of the Adepta Sororitas always looks to the Inquisition first. Yet after Thor died, the Imperial cult began to gain power again, and as the ecclesiarchy flourished, so too did the Ordo Hereticus grow with it. For nothing piques an inquisitor's suspicion more readily than a holy man claiming to speak with the emperor's voice. Often, its agents pose as servants as the ecclesiarchy, feigning subservience to the cardinal's will until they have sufficient proof of the cleric's guilt. It is a rare priest with whom a member of the Ordo Hereticus cannot find fault. Although the ecclesiarchy has its own internal regulatory bodies, it is still the role of the Inquisition to monitor all of the state organs, including the ecclesiarchy as the state church of the Imperium. The ecclesiarchy must be particularly guarded, however, because of the extraordinary role that the faith of the Imperial Creed has come to play in the daily lives of the Imperium's people since the end of the Horus Heresy all those years ago. Nothing can move the men and women of the Imperium like the power of their faith in the Emperor of Mankind. And there are many corrupt individuals like Gauge Van Dier who would try and exploit this reality for their own selfish gain. Even worse are those who would pervert these honest expressions of faith into something darker and heretical, such as the creation of a new chaos cult that ultimately drives a planetary rebellion against the rule of the Emperor. The arrival of the Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor is met with as much trepidation as awe, since none know where their gimlet gaze may land and upon whom their suspicions might fall. In addition to monitoring the ecclesiarchy, ensuring that the wars of faith do not exceed their mandate, or that its many cardinals do not amass more power than it is deemed appropriate, the Ordo Hereticus keeps a close eye on many other imperial organizations, like the Adeptus Arbites, the Adeptus Astartes.
Really? They monitor the Space Marines?
Well, they like to think so. The Adeptus Sororitas, and also fellow members of the Inquisition.
Right.
Now, Yuksen, there have been some moments where they have tried to censor the Astartes. In particular, an inquisitor by the name of Casme Kisnaros, who tried to take on the Space Wolves at Fenris, which...
So you already covered that in another box, though, right?
Yeah, it was if I recall right, it's called The Final Siege of the Fang.
Right.
And the best way to describe that is, okay, so give you the bullet points. This started with the First War of Armageddon. And Logan Grimnar shows up with his Space Wolves. He fights alongside the Imperium soldiers, along with some Grey Knights and some other Astartes chapters, and they win, right?
And I believe also civilians, right? That was one of the reasons why they're just like kill all the civilians.
Yeah, it wasn't just the civilians, it was also the Imperial Guard that was there. And this Inquisitor shows up, Kisnaros, and he shows up and he goes, okay, we have to exterminate all of them. And Grimnar took one look at this anyways and said, that's not cool. These people fought for the Imperium.
I'm pretty sure that's not the words that he went with. That's not cool.
No, but it was probably along the lines of, are you daft, man? These men fought and bled for the Imperium. How dare you try to exterminate them? Something along those lines, probably.
Except for more Space Wolf-like.
Yeah. And Kisnaros' response was, well, I really don't care. And so Grimnar, what he does is he actually ferries these people onto his ships and then he disappears. So then begins this epic chase as the Inquisition tries to chase them all down. And Grimnar keeps dropping them off in different planets. And like, I'm hoping you guys are safe here. Hopefully they don't know they show up. Some of them, the Inquisition never found. Some of them, the Inquisition did. Which was unfortunate because the Inquisition's immediate response was bomb the place. So eventually, anyways, get back to Kisnaros is just like, I'm done with this. I'm just going to take over the Space Wolves, which is just the dumbest
take
thing.
Out the Space Wolves, not take over. Take them out.
Yeah. And he went to go do that on Fenris, and it makes sense. It didn't work. Now, mind you, I also have to mention anyways, the thing that is really scary about Kisnaros is that he wasn't actually part of the Ordo Hereticus. He
wasn't part of any of the Ordos, was he?
No, that's the scary part. He was unaligned. He was above them.
Which is probably one of the only reasons why he was able to get the Grey Knights to work for him.
Right.
Probably, since the Grey Knights are a chamber militant of the Malleus, if somebody from the Hereticus or from the Xenos probably went and said, I need this, and tried to order them, they could just go, no.
Unless they gave
because
a good reason.
They're a militant of the Malleus.
Right, but unless they gave a good reason, like, for instance, this whole world is infested with demons.
Well, I mean, I said if they were ordered to, they could just basically go, no, not going to happen.
Right.
If they want to.
So in the end, by the way, anyways, Kisnaros ends up being beheaded by Logan. And your boy, the Dreadnought. Crap, what's his name? Bjorn?
And then Logan actually almost gets killed.
It's
Yeah.
debatable.
His weapon gets broken by a Grey Knight during their duel.
Yeah, but then the rest of his space wolves show up and they all just start to kind of kill everybody there. And what really stops it is it's Bjorn, right? Right?
Yes.
He shows up on the bridge and he's just like, enough.
And he's not happy because he has to be teleported there to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, Bjorn is the cranky old grandpa of the space wolves
that everybody respects.
Yes.
No matter if they're space wolves or
anybody else. I mean, this is a guy who took countenance with the Emperor when he was still alive. So, yeah, he shows up anyways and he goes, enough. And everybody, like, in mid fighting, just kind of like freezes.
And he's like, this is how things are going to go. and they all just go, okay. I'm going into my corner now.
It's like if the teacher shows up anyways, if there's a brawl on the, in a elementary school, if there's a brawl on the playground and everybody's getting into it, all of a sudden the teacher comes in and goes, what's going on? And everybody just kind of freezes. And it's like, this is how this is going to end. And everybody just kind of sits there and goes, yes, sir. That's kind of what happened. But Yuksen, I kind of went into that a little bit more detail than I thought I was going to. But Yuksen, what do you think of the Hereticus?
I do think they're considered darker, and with good reason, because they are the ones that seriously most people think, and rightly so, since they're more involved with the citizens of the Imperium probably than any of the other ones. They seem to be more high-strung, so to speak, and so they have much more notoriety of being gung-ho. And
I don't know, Yuksen, if that's necessarily true. I think most Inquisitors are high-strung. I think it's more along the lines of what you just said, though, is that the Hereticus is focused inward.
Right.
The Malleus and the Xenos are focused outward.
Yes. And even as you mentioned, though, because of their role, they've become they have more skepticism than any of the other Ordos, because that's basically their job, is to find issues with people specifically. Not whether or not they're doing wrong things, but if they aren't in line.
Honestly,
in other words, in comparison to like the Ordo Malleus, which is going around going, okay, are you casting spells? Are you throwing out runes and stuff? The Hereticus is going, you stepped out of line, you're dead, or forever imprisoned. It's like, if I just stepped out of line. Yes, but you aren't following the will of the Emperor anymore.
Which I think, anyways, is probably one of the reasons why you and I despise them the most, is because they have this like stranglehold grip on the Imperium. And yes, a lot of the stuff that we talked about anyways is like they're hunting for the heretic. It's like, yeah, I that seems like a positive, right? But they also are looking for people like, for instance, like I said before, like Tech Mechanicuses have been known to be killed by Hereticus because, and it's not because they're unaligned with the Imperium, it's because they're trying to develop new technology. It's like, well, that's against the Emperor
with the Imperium.
Yeah. So they're literally continuing this seeded path that the Imperium of Man is in.
Right.
They are the stranglehold on it, which is just frustrating.
In comparison to the Malleus, which is focused on chaos, and the Xenos, which are focused on the alien.
Which, by the way, I mentioned anyways that they try to keep in line the other the other Inquisition groups. You know how hard that's got to be anyways for the Ordo Xenos? I mean, because the Ordo Xenos, one of the things I actually do like about the Ordo Xenos is that they do produce new technological advances because they are on the cutting edge.
but
Yeah. Well, and sometimes
they're the ones that employ the apes, you know, the Jokero.
Right.
The guys that make modifications that may be useful or just
right
decoration.
But one of the things that I like about the Ordo Xenos is that, yeah, while they keep a lot of the stuff for themselves, a lot of times that stuff does actually end up trickling down into the Imperium. So there is like this slow, you know, like technological advance through them. The Malleus are just a straight up defense group, in my opinion, against the worst thing that is fighting against the Imperium, which makes them,
they are extremely hard to find fault with too, because of what they're dealing with. It's like, okay, where do you draw the line? And this is a part that we're also going to cover in this next part that I'm about to talk about, which maybe we should move on to.
Which I was actually just about to ask you about, which is, so all these, okay, so we've just talked about the three, right?
Yeah.
And these guys are actually separated in two different categories. And we briefly talked about one with Kyril Cinderman, the Puritan group. There's another group called the Radicals. And they both are still well established within the Imperium. But the way they view things is completely and utterly different, right, Yuksen?
Right. And mind you, these are on a spectrum, okay?
Right.
Just like anything else. You can have like, these people are radicals and these people are real radical.
Yeah. So yeah. Could you actually run us through what's the difference between a Puritan and a radical?
Okay, so now regardless of being a Puritan or a radical Inquisitor, Inquisitors themselves care little for morality, as we've kind of mentioned, and nothing at all for the Imperium's many laws and procedures, except when they choose to make use of them. They are the Emperor's left hand, as the Adeptus Terra is his right, and stand in judgment over all the Imperium's organizations and citizens. Indeed, an Inquisitor is apart from the rest of mankind in every way that matters. By ancient tradition, their authority comes from the Emperor himself. There is no hierarchy to which they must answer, and they are beholden only to their own fellows. More than this, a bearer of the inquisitorial seal can requisition any servant in the Imperium to assist in their mission, from the lowliest of clerks to entire Space Marine chapters and Imperial Navy battle fleets. It is actually rather simple when discussing the difference between Puritans and radicals. To the Puritans, it is of the utmost importance that Inquisition doctrine be upheld. An extreme example of Puritanism is almost executing a living saint. For the radicals, it is more of, let's follow the spirit of the imperial doctrines, believing that the end justifies the means, and finding little value in adhering to the convention too closely. Extreme action for radical would be to cordon off a region and virus bomb it to death, all the worlds and the people on them within it, so that the Tyranids wouldn't have anything to eat.
Jiminy Christmas! Who did that?
A fellow by the name of Cryptman.
So when did this happen?
It was called the Galactic Cordon.
Ah.
And after one of the two tendrils of the Leviathan was destroyed, and basically he went, okay, I'm cordoning off this region, and we're going to virus bomb everything on these planets so that the Tyranids will expend resources trying to invade these planets, but won't find any biosources to eat.
I hate to ask, but did it work?
It reduced the speed of which it moved and advanced. But of course, at the same time, he had just killed billions upon billions upon billions of people.
One might even say trillions.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that it didn't work.
Well, it slowed the Leviathan's advance, but no.
It's still advanced, though, is what you're saying.
Yes. It's much, much slower.
Okay. But I do actually have a question for you. So we have talked about Inquisitor Greyfax before, correct?
Yes.
Most notably in the Ultramar campaign, where Rabute Gilman was raised back to life, and the Celestine Crusade, which took place after the 13th Black Crusade by Abaddon, in which
Cadia fell.
Cadia fell, yes. And Greyfax is kind of, okay, both you and I, we can both agree on this. We do not like Greyfax.
She is definitely an extremist.
Yes,
no matter which way you look at it, she is an extremist.
So here's the question. Is she a Puritan or a radical?
See, I'd put her more in the Puritan than the radical.
Why?
Because the viewpoint that she's under is, well, if it can be stopped right now with the things that I can utilize right now and the method that is supposed to be done, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
So she is very...
And why isn't that a radical thing?
Because radical, it's like, well, they did do something wrong and...
Oh, no. Okay, Yuksen, you literally just described a radical anyways, going, well, the way that we just fix this is by virus bombing planets. That seems pretty cut and dry to me. So, as far as I know, Greyfax hasn't done that. So, what it really comes down to, I think, anyways, what is a radical and what is a Puritan?
I think part of what makes the difference between looking at those is the fact that Greyfax, from what I know, has stayed within what you would consider the doctrines.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned beforehand, anyways,
in comparison to Cryptman, who was like bombing things, which isn't really in the doctrine to bomb innocents.
Okay, so
to stop something.
So hang on a second. One of the things that you mentioned, anyways, about Puritans is that their concept is that what the Inquisition doctrine is.
Right.
I would disagree with that slightly, for a Puritan at least. For a Puritan, I think it has to do with a lot more of the imperial cult. It has to do with, it's the emperor's will. It is the God Emperor's will.
Sorry, it's not the imperial doctrine. It's the Inquisition doctrine.
No. I know that's what you said, and I said it. I think that the Puritans fall more along the lines, anyways, of the imperial cult.
Okay.
As opposed to, I mean, because the Inquisition's doctrine is just maintain mankind. I mean, that's the basis of what we've discovered, correct? So radicals, I think, anyways, I think one of the things that really, like you said, anyways, radicals, it's the spirit of following what the God Emperor wants, as opposed to a Puritan, which is, this is law. It's almost like Terran 42's D&D. Okay, bear with me here. So before, when you build your character in D&D or Dungeons and Dragons, you have to establish what their character is, and you get a couple of different standpoints. You have, what is it? It's lawful, chaotic, neutral, evil, or good, right? I think those are the ones that you
chaotic, neutral, and then lawful.
Oh, there's also neutral.
Subsections are good. No, the subsections are good, evil, and neutral.
Yeah, so
and then you have lawful and chaotic.
Right. So you have two tiers, anyways, and both of them are 3. So you have lawful, neutral, or evil, and then you have
good, neutral, or evil,
or good, neutral, and evil, and then you have lawful, neutral, and chaotic, right?
Yeah, there's 3 in there. I just know about lawful and chaos because those are the ones that
anyways, a Puritan is going to be, no matter what it's doing, anyways, it's going to be lawful. And they try to pick, anyways, lawful good, but, a lot of times, like, for instance, with Greyfax, a lot of times that's really lawful evil. But with radicals, on the other hand, you're talking about more like chaotic good or evil. That's probably the best way I could probably describe Puritans and radicals. What do you think?
Well, example.
No. Do you think that's a pretty good synopsis on? Okay.
Yeah. An example that they give when it comes to, for example, ends justifies the means is having as part of your entourage demon hosts.
Yeah, most would find that evil.
That is a very radical mentality. For those who don't know what demon host is, basically they take either a person or multiple peoples and put a demon in them so that they can get answers or have upped up powers or whatever.
Which is, incredibly, heretical when you stop and think about it. But this goes back to the question anyways. Is Greyfax really a Puritan or a radical? And I agree with you on the aspect that she seems significantly more along the lines of like, this is, if I was going to put her into a D&D category, I would say she is lawful evil. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So,
somebody who thinks I'm going to try to shoot a living saint because the person doesn't follow.
I don't trust them.
The cult. Yeah, I don't trust them. It's like, you do realize this person is a living saint who's done nothing but help the Imperium.
Hence the name Saint. Well, yeah. And if you want to know more about that, go ahead and check out the Ultramar campaign that we did. We talk a lot about Greyfax there. And she is a very interesting character. The more that I've read about her, the more I still think she's lawful evil. But we have one last thing that we do need to talk about, and that is the Ordo Minoris. Whilst the three great Ordos of the Ordos Majoris are perhaps the best known and established, there are a number of smaller Ordos charged with guardianship of particular aspects of the Imperium. Whilst in the theory, these smaller Ordos are of the rank of the power of the Ordo Hereticus, Xenos, and Malleus, in practice, they seldom control as many resources as these great organizations. These minor Ordos are significantly smaller than the main three and are often formed to combat specific rather than broad threats to the Imperium. Some police the ranks of the assassin death cults, whilst others tend to the workings of the Black Ships. Rumors persist of the Inquisition Ordos, which watch the officers of the Imperial Guard and the Imperial Navy, and others whose sole task is to purge the ranks of the Inquisition itself. Most of these Ordo Minoris are largely unknown, even to other members of the Inquisition. Many are little more than cabals of the Inquisitors allied against a common threat, while others are, in essence, specialized subordos. Other nigh unknown Ordos might interest themselves in matters so esoteric or specialized they are entirely unknown to their fellows. Now, over the next few weeks, we will briefly go over a few of these. But before we go, brother, I do have a couple of questions. First, which of the Ordos Majoris is your favorite?
Hands down, probably be Xenos.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Although a strong second, Malleus. Malleus is pretty cool too, especially because of the Grey Knights.
Well, I also really like this one called Kotias, which we'll get into when we discuss the.
Well, I was actually going to ask my second question was, what was your second? What's your favorite Minoris?
I am not sure. I know that there's one that I found kind of ridiculous.
There's a bunch of them.
Because it is a Ordos whose sole purpose is to look after another Ordos, which nobody knows what that Ordo does. So,
but apparently it's very important.
It's just like, yes, you Inquisitors make sure that those Inquisitors are doing their job correctly. And what's their job? We don't know.
Me personally, I probably go with the Malleus as my favorite, just simply because of the Grey Knights.
You mean when it comes to the Majoris?
What's that?
You mean when it comes to the Majoris?
Yeah. With the Minoris is probably the Sicarius. They're and like I said, we will go into them. Probably they're one of the ones that we will go into, but they're the Inquisition's assassins who look over the officiorum assassins. So they're the assassins who look over the assassins,
who are actually trained purely as assassins.
Yes. So
not sure how well that'll go.
So the way it goes is that these are the assassins overlooking the assassins who are trained by the assassins to look over the assassins. And if you're not confused by that point anyways, well, we'll go into it later on. But unfortunately,
the
folks,
assassins aren't doing their job.
Unfortunately, folks, that'd be it for this week. Join us next week as we go into the details on the first of the Ordo Majoris, the Ordo Malleus.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this box. Feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and comment. And don't forget to check out the shop. We got some cool stuff there, like clothes, pillows, and hats.
Nope. And don't forget Rabbits, Yuksen.
Right, don't forget the rabbits.
Have a great day. And as always, until next time, this is Zeckthar
and Yuksen
signing off.